there are three common hang-ups that we need to address before we move forward. One of our first hang-ups that we need to address before we can build a missional team within a community to catalyst change is this. We're afraid to experiment because of a fear of failure. The biblical parable of the tenants is about someone who was afraid of the oppressive culture and didn't even try to make a difference. Sometimes, regardless if we're church planting or we're in a traditional church or we are doing missional community, we see the culture at hand, we see the problems at hand, and we're afraid to even step out and change because we know we're going to be met with such opposition, or we just think it's not possible. I would say that we need to first, before we can even build missional teams, realize that we are going to fail and that it's okay to fail. Benjamin Franklin says it this way: I didn't fail the test, I just found 100 ways to do it wrong. I speak this morning as someone who has found 100 ways to do it wrong, and I think I've learned more from my failure than my success. I am sure most of you are that way as well. I speak that being truth for me, especially as my roles in church planting and building teams. But just because I failed so many times doesn't mean that I don't want to journey forward, even though the journey is going to be easy and uncomfortable. It hasn't stopped me from continually looking to map our future together. By admitting that we're going to be wrong, it disarms some of the expectations that we encounter at times. The second mishap that I would like to address before we talk about building teams is this. We mistake success for fruitfulness. This has been a problem in our institutional churches. This has been a problem in church planting. Believe it or not, it's a problem that we do find in the other context I mentioned, missional community. We start to think that we have to achieve to a certain place to be successful. We often cover it up with words like sustainable. Mike Breen at Verge of 2013 said it this way: fruitfulness is more important than success. Fruitfulness is more important than success. Do we believe that, though? Can we even arrive at what we believe the difference is? Am I striving for fruitfulness or am I striving for success? We'll find that there are actually a very big contrast. Do we really believe that fruitfulness is more important than success? So fruitfulness is defined like this: producing good results, beneficial, profitable, fruitful investigations, abounding in fruit as trees or other plants, bearing fruit abundantly, producing an abundant growth as fruitful soil or fruitful rain. Success, which is a noun, says this: the favorable or prosperous termination of attempts or endeavors, the accomplishment of one's goals, the attainment of wealth, position, honors, or the like, a performance or achievement that is marked by success. As we look to build missional teams to be a catalyst of change in our traditional churches or our church plants or our missional communities, that often when we are striving for success, we are striving out of self. The first definition there says it's an attempt or endeavor, the accomplishment of one's goal. Fruitfulness is an idea and a success that is harvested through community. A visual representation that may look like this. For too long, we have defined churches and the way of doing things much like this picture of the chessboard where there's a king and he gets to cast a vision and all the pawns carry it out. We tend to do this with our church planting visions. We tend to do this with visions of missional community, and we tend to do this with traditional church. Even when we're trying to change traditional church to missional community or to a missional expression, we tend to have a guy at the top who casts an exciting and contagious vision, and he hopes the pawns can run with it. It's really the same formula that we've been doing all along, and it will be just as successful as it's been all along. Building a missional team should resemble this guy carrying his coat and laying down his suit coat for this lady across the puddle. We don't see people do this anymore, but it's the idea of laying a bridge that's safely for other people safe for them to cross, to carry the vision, and to carry it on and release them to go on the path and do that more than we allow ourselves to go on the path. The third most common hang-up of missional team building is this. We fall guilty to what I call copy and paste mentality. So we attend lots of cool church planning conferences. We attend lots of missional community conferences. We attend things like Exponential and Verge. And we come back with formulas that we are sure are going to work in our context. And you know what? The church has had an unhealthy relationship with this idea of copy and paste for a really long time. So, when you were a kid and you did something dumb, your mom or dad would always say, so if all your friends were jumping off a bridge, would you do it as well? Of course, we always said no, or we'd say some smart aleck thing like, how tall is the bridge? How tall is the cliff? Is there water underneath the cliff? And this computer right here is the Apple IIgs, okay? This Apple IIgs is I used in elementary school. We got to play cool things like Oregon Trail on it. And I remember the first day that we learned that we could hold Command or Control C and copy something and paste it somewhere else. Our church has an unhealthy realization of both of these images. Let me explain to you how. We tell our kids it's not safe to follow everyone else and jump off the cliff. But our churches have been doing the same way of institution for 300 years, which is why we see the same lack of fruit. We're getting the same thing we've always gotten. You know, in school, when you would hit that Control-C button on the computer and copy someone else's work and put it as your own work, we called it plagiarism. And it usually got your paper littered with a little bit of a red mark instead of an A or a fruitful paper. We have an unhealthy attachment to Control-C in our church. We like to see what other people are doing, what's working for other people, and try it in our context. We read books on team building. We read books about developing purposeful churches. And all of a sudden we think that if we can copy and paste what works there in our context, everything will be fine. We have an unhealthy attraction to the copy and paste mentality. Though we tell others it's wrong, we've done it ourselves for our whole life as an institutional church. Through the Holy Spirit, the first thing that I would encourage you to do is this. Identify where you are feeling called in your context to journey. So as a church planner, as a missional experimenter, or as an institutionalized church, find where you see God or the Holy Spirit calling you to journey together. This doesn't mean you have to use current church leaders. For those of us who are an institutional church, we expect sometimes that we have to use the board in place or the church leaders in place to make a change of culture within our church. If we want to go from institutional to missional, we automatically think we have to use the players that are in place. I'm an ex-punk rocker, so excuse this line, but insurrection is not always a bad thing. If we are willing to identify where we are feeling called, regardless if it's against some other ideas present, it's an important thing to hold true to what the Holy Spirit is calling you to and not the institutional church. Then identify at least 6 people to be intentionally aware, committed, and focused with you in this mission. Jesus chose 12 people. Mike Breen says you need to choose 8. I am suggesting that we need to choose at least 6. If you are married, I think it's important to do this with other couples. I think this is fun, but to identify at least 6 people who you mesh with really well, who you get along with really well, and to be intentionally aware with them, to be committed together, and they are focused on the same vision and mission that you identified in what I talked about the last slide. So be able to write a mission statement. I do this in my own life for myself, 1 or 2 sentences of, hey, this is what God has called me to do, to be a catalyst of change in this setting, in this context. And to get there, I know that I'm going to need a team. So I think the change is going to look like this as I meet with the Holy Spirit. Then find those people that also see the vision that you see. As you choose those 6 people, make sure they are 6 people that you can disciple, but you can also hear from. See, in that picture where the pawns are all gathered at the king is the one at the top, and he's telling the pawns what to do and how to carry out this vision that the Holy Spirit gave him. When we're building missional teams to be a catalyst of change, we need to make sure that these 6 people can be people that we, yes, will disciple and be able to speak life into, but also that we can hear from them. And it's going to be important that we can hear from them and submit ourselves to them as well. We need to make sure that these 6 people, that we have the ability to speak and to invest. This is a life shape that I've come up with when I'm doing premarital counseling, but it also works in building missional teams to be able to catalyst the change in your church. So each one of us has our own identity. My wife and I have our own identity. We have our own life experiences. We have our own stories. We have things that have shaped us, things that convict us. We have different things that energize us. And we each have a unique identity. When we bring that together, some of those things are going to clash. Some of those things, though, are also going to jump and jive very well together. So as we build a team of 6 people that we really believe in, that also really believe in our mission, and that we are ready to hear from each other, ready to speak discipleship into each other's lives, we also need to make sure that we're not making them speak to our identity, but that we are developing a shared identity together, just like we do in a marriage. So, my experience as a punk rocker is an important part of who I am growing up, but it's not going to be really important for the rest of the people in my church, right? Our church has been there since 1720. It's really not going to speak a bunch of life to them. Most of them probably don't even know what punk rock is. So, we need to make sure that when we come together, when these 6 people come together, we need to see where is it that we agree on this vision. You know, God has given me this vision to knock down Goliath and to kill the machine and start to push forward in the missional experiments in our neighborhood. And this is what I think it means, but let's see what it means for other people as well. Let's jump and jive and see where together we share an identity. And then what I would encourage you to do is write a definition of that too. Together, we are being a catalyst of change, and this is our mission. So my wife and I do this on a regular basis when we start to discern a new season. I have a mission statement for my life that says what I think God has called me to, and she has her own experiences, heart callings, beliefs, spiritual giftings, hobbies, and talents. But then we also develop a missional statement together. In this season, right now, together, God is calling us to be here, to do this, and to use this conviction or to use this part of our story together. Our teams, our missional teams, need to be able to do this as well. Listen together for a shared sense of identity. Secondly, we need to strive to have all the 5-fold ministry represented in your identified team. So in Ephesians 4, we talk about the 5-fold ministry. We have apostles, we have prophets, we have teachers, evangelists, and pastors. A few months ago, we shared a video here of Alan Hirsch. I think it was the Jesus is Lord one, where he talks about the same thing we heard him talk about in Kansas City when we were out there, that our churches, our missional communities, our church plants are always around positional power. They're around pastors and they're around teachers. And we expect these people to carry the weight of the church. We expect them to be also the apostle, the prophet, and evangelist. When I was church planting in California, I quickly realized that this guy, positional power or spiritual gifting, cannot be all of those people. If I take you'll see on your papers, there's something called the 5-fold survey. And if you haven't checked that website out, it's a free resource. I was going to print some offline copies of it for you today, but it's much better to take it online. It calculates it faster. So please check that out, fivefold survey, and it'll tell you where in Ephesians 4 do you fall. Are you a teacher? Are you a person who tends to be a guardian of the truth? Are you an apostle, one who is sent out to do work? You can envision where the church needs to go or the missional community needs to go, and you can go do it. Are you a prophet? Are you the one that is always prophetically standing in a way and going, don't see God going that way. You know, guys, we're not really keeping Jesus center here. Or are you the evangelist, the person who is just always bringing good news? You don't really care about the tensions in play. All you care about is making sure that the mission of God goes forward. When I was church planting in California, as a prophet, which is my base gifting, I was in a positional role of pastor. But you know what? A prophet is a really bad mentor for a teacher. Just like a shepherd is a really bad mentor for a prophet. Shepherds like to keep everyone together. Prophets like to draw the sword every once in a while. When we are building a missional team, we need to make sure that we have all 5 of these ministries represented on our missional team to be a catalyst of change. If we don't, we will get the same results we've always gotten. I would also say that it's important for us to have people who are hearing from God, people who are able to reveal that in new ways, people who are always calling new people into the mission, people who are shepherding the conflict of the mission as it journeys out, and people that are always laying groundwork for where to go. It is important that our missional teams, as we catalyst for change, have this represented. And that as you push through, within 3 months, I would encourage you to have each one of those people on your team. See, there's 5-fold ministry. I said you should have at least 6. So you can be in the middle regardless where you're at on this list. I would recommend you, even if you're an apostle, to have another apostle on the team. But make sure within 3 months that these people are not just submitting to you or just being discipled by you, but also begin to disciple others. Release the prophet to find other prophets and to speak the mission of wherever you're trying to go in their life. So as you develop that definition of this is where God's calling us together to be a catalyst of change, I now release you, prophet, to go find other prophets and call them into this mission. I release you, apostles, to do the same, and evangelists and shepherds and teachers. It's also important for our missional teams to be a catalyst of change, to experience a high sense of play together. We're going to have some time here in a couple minutes to look at this life shape. This is at your table. When we work for change in a church, it's stressful. When you're looking to create an insurrection of an oppressive or an entrenched culture, it is oppressive. It will choke the life out of you. If we cannot learn to have a high sense of play together and a high sense of purpose together, we are going to be a pointless team together. If we have a high sense of play, we like to play around together. We get really good conversations going at dinner. We can joke with each other. We can make fun of each other. But you know what? We don't get a whole bunch of stuff done. Our missional team has just become kindergarten. We can play together well, but we're actually not accomplishing anything. If we don't really play well together and you're not accomplishing anything, you've picked the wrong 6. You've picked 6 that you cannot speak to or hear from, and you're going to do nothing but spread death as you look to be a catalyst of change, as you look to go from institution to mission, as you look to be a church plant, whatever your context is. If you do not play well together and you do not accomplish anything together, it's either time for you to duck out or it's time for you to find a new 6. You will just be an agent of death to the community in which you're actually trying to bring life. If you have a lot of purpose together, and that's the only thing that holds you together, I would argue for those of you that come from a Mennonite background here, this is where most of our churches are, that we have a high sense of what needs to be done. We are human doers. We like to go and do justice work. We like to go and do this. But we don't have a lot of time for this because, that's a waste of time. If we have a high sense of purpose and we can accomplish stuff together, but we don't play well together, we've just created a staffing culture. We've created a picture where that pawn are all at the feet of the king. It's defined by partnership. We just need to get things done. It's effective for some breakthrough, but it's really unsustainable because it all is based on one or two people that are trying to manage the business. And it's a little fun. There's a high turnover of staff, but many tasks are completed. This doesn't let us have long-lasting change. We need to make sure that we have high play and high purpose together. We also need to make sure that we mirror Jesus in our team. We need to make sure that even though we might have started with a vision and now we've arrived with a vision, that we don't leave that vision with us. This is the discipleship square. There's a lot that can be said about this. I sat in a year-long program that did nothing but talk about this square. But there's one thing that I want you to take away from this. Jesus quickly released the 12 and the 72 to fail, to find out through their failures, and to figure out things for themselves rather than just copying and pasting. Those three hang-ups we talked about earlier. Jesus released the 12 and the 72 to be able to carry on the mission themselves. So, in this square, how it works, I can't use my laser pointer either. Says this. Jesus says, you know what? I'm going to do a little bit for now in the beginning. And you're going to watch me. But eventually we're going to get to a place where I'm going to do and you're going to do it with me. You get to practice with me. Then we get to a place where Jesus steps back and he says, now you're going to do it. You're going to go out into the countryside. So when you come back, we can process what you saw. And we can process what you experienced, where you failed. We call this section the you do, I'll help on occasion section. And then we get to a place where Jesus just says adios, he returns to heaven, and he leaves the people to figure things out for themselves. That's the last part of this quadrant. So it goes L1 to L2 to L3 to L4. Then it repeats with new people. We have done a very good job at copying and pasting, but failing to release people to carry on missions that we have arrived at together. So yes, in the beginning, we'll need some high direction and high example, but we cannot keep that same rhythm the whole way through with our missional teams. We need to make sure we enter a place where there's high imitation and high accessibility to us as leaders, and then to a place where we become high on discussion, the people begin to feel competence, and we are willing to shut up and to get out of the way and to release people to do what God is calling them to do in our shared conviction. Too often, we try to keep it like this. I'm going to do it, you watch, then you go do it, and you'll have to come back to me for new ways of how to do it eventually. Here we journey together, and we eventually back off, and this is the apostolistic role of seeing mission get carried on to something bigger than ourselves, or to use an earlier term, this is what fruitfulness looks like and not success. My last slide is this. We'll also talk about this one at your tables. This is a life shape that I came up with that talks about our ability to be self-aware and intentional. Our missional teams, our teams working on a catalyst of change, need to be aware, and they also need to be intentional together. If our missional teams are not aware of the narratives that our churches or our institutions or our groups are projecting on the neighborhood, then we are really just blindly leading. We need to make sure our missional teams are people that are intentional about what they're doing, but they are also self-aware of what that looks like and how it comes off to other people. If we are doing everything with good intention, but not self-aware of how that good intention comes off, then we have failed to actually be creative in the context God has called us to spread mission.